You're righty there, fellow mini painters and lovers of all things Oldhammer related, and welcome to another video from Nostalgia and Hobbies. This video is going to be a part 2 of the squat commission that I'm doing for a client, and again, it's going to be some models that are a little bit different and not actually 40k related, but still Games Workshop. So on that slightly cryptid note, cue the title. When Warhammer 40k 2nd edition was released, none of the codexes has been done yet for any of the armies that you could use in the game. So as a stopgap measure, they released in the box game this, which is the Codex Army Lists. This is the booklet that new players would go to get any information they wanted on how to build their armies. And you would have all the information in there ranging from your Space Marines, Imperial Guard, Tyranids, Chaos, as well as squats. Now, unfortunately, later on down the line in 2nd edition, it seems as though they figured out that they weren't going to be doing squats anymore. So there isn't as much information elsewhere as you will get in here. There's more information in this booklet than you will find elsewhere, but still not huge amounts. But there is enough to build quite a nice army from. Unfortunately, in the Codex army lists, you didn't get any background fluff on the forces that you could collect, presumably because they were planning on putting all of that in the codexes when they released them. And unfortunately, as we know, squats did not get a codex. But what you do get is a layout that is very much like the codexes had themselves. So at the top little bit, you have about how you can take your characters, squads and support and what points values they have to be in proportion to your army. And you've got everything from your Warlord, Battle Standard Bearer, Hearthguard, Engineer Guild, Ancestor Lords. And then when it comes into your squads, you've got Warrior Squads, Attack Squads and Thunderer Squads. And what the client's wanting for these ones is attack squads. And when you look at the profile, these are the close assault ones. You can see they've got movement 3, so they are very slow, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 3, strength 3, toughness 4, which makes them quite nice and tough, only 1 wound, 2 initiative and 1 attack, but leadership 9. So again, pretty high leadership for them. And it says here in the write-up that they can take additional assault weapons from the war gear, which is what you also got in this little booklet. And in the war gear list, it's got listed all of the assault weapons that you can take. So you've got the typical ones like your chainsword, power axe, power glove, power sword, sword or axe, so just a basic sword or axe, auto pistol, bolt pistol, the standard ones that you could get. And what the client is asking is for them to all have power axes. Unfortunately, Games Workshop never released any models for the squats when it came to Warhammer 40k 2nd edition. All the models that were out were released during Rogue Trader. There were some that were released during that era, and some of them were very nice, especially like the trikes, things like those are quite iconic from back in the day. As well as this Humpty Dumpty boy, at least that's what I've always called him. I think it's called, it's an exoskeleton. So to get around the fact that there weren't any close combat squats released for 40k, the client has found quite an interesting way of getting around it. And the way he's chosen to get around it is by using these models. Marauder Troll Slayers. Now, they may not have anything on them that marks them out as particularly 40k, but he's asked me to paint them, or at least paint their axes in a way that suggests they are power axes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try using the airbrush again, do an effect on the blades of the axes to make them look a bit like power axes, and then hopefully that will tie them in very nicely with the 2nd edition 40k aesthetic. And they'll work hopefully quite well. So what I'm going to do is grab yourself a cuppa, go to the painting desk and see if I can manage this. Where these are Warhammer Fantasy Troll Slayers, the client has asked me if I can paint the axes to look as though they're a sort of a power weapon. So that would be to sort of give them a sort of a glowing effect, is what I'm going to go for. And for that I'm going to start first, and I've started for the blue ones. What I've done is a base coat of Vallejo's Game Air Range Imperial Blue. It's a really nice dark blue. Just put that all over the axe head. And then after that, what I'm going to do is use Vallejo's Magic Blue. And I'm going to do this through an airbrush. You don't have to use an airbrush if you don't have one. You can apply these paints thinly with glazing. I just have an airbrush and I enjoy doing it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start gently spritzing it from the edge down and building it up. And trying to leave it so that I haven't really touched the middle of it. See there, we can slowly build it up over a couple couple of coats. I'm doing this first so I can avoid having to do any masking or anything when I've later on painted all the model up. Okay, and then turn the model around so you can do it directional, and then work from the bottom corner up. There we go. And I might build it up a little bit more, get a bit close to the edge there. And doing it with an airbrush, it's a lot easier and a lot nicer. Once you've figured out some trigger control, you can just build it up and feather it up, and you leave that nice little bit of darker blue in the middle. After that, I'm then going to jump up to Electric Blue, again by Vallejo's Game Air. Same sort of idea, where I'm just going to spritz it on, work from the top corner down, or from where you want the light to be the most intense, and just gently feather it in and brighten it up. I'm trying to leave some of the magic blue that we've just done visible. There we go. And again, just turn it around. And just gently feather it in. And there we go. And that is a nice, quite a simple power weapon glow effect. Once you've added some edge highlighting to that, that'll make the effect pop quite nicely. After the airbrushing work's been done, I'm going to start by applying all the base coats with a brush. And the first one is going to be on their hair. And for that, I'm going to use Jacaro Orange. And if you thin this paint down, you'll find it goes into the detail of the sculpted hair a lot easier. And you will have to build this up over a few coats where we used a black base coat, but it's only be like 2 or 3 coats to get a good coverage. And this is going to be over his hair, as well as any of his beard, moustache, and eyebrows as well. You can definitely see why there is such a love for these older sculpts. And after a couple of coats, that's his ginger hair done. The next colour I'm going to be using is Bugman's Glow, and I'm going to be doing that on all of his flesh areas. And there's quite a bit on these because they're Slayers, they're usually topless as well. Build this up over a couple of thin coats again. You can also use it to tidy up any areas of the hair. And there we go, that is the skin all done. Again, that took a couple of coats to get it done. It's not too bad. And detail on him is very nice, especially in the face. Next up, I'm going to do the X handles. And for that, I'm going to use a base coat of Gawthor Brown. A slightly lighter brown, but it's a good foundation for doing the axe handles. And again, this will take a couple of coats to get it to go over nice and smoothly in full coverage, but it's worth it. And the next colour I'm going to do is Calgar Blue, which I'm going to be doing on any trousers that the Slayers are wearing. I'm doing them this way so that it ties them in with the units that I've already done as part of this commission. So even though they are Warhammer Fantasy Slayers, this will hopefully aid in making them look more appropriate and still fit in to a 2nd edition 40k game. Again, this will take a couple of coats because it's not a base colour as well, so it will definitely take a good couple of coats to get a nice, smooth, full opacity to the coverage. Thin them down and keep going, and you'll get a nice coverage to it. Next up, I'm going to do all of the darker leather areas. For that, I'm going to use Dryad bark. If you have a look around the models, you'll find they've got boots, some of them have got little leather pouches like this one's got. And all you have to do is just look around the models carefully and make sure you get them all. After that, I'm going to pick out all the metal parts, such as the axe head. For that, I'm going to be using lead belcher. Another detail that this particular one has, and a couple others have got similar things, is it's got a rope belt around here. And some of the other ones will have little belts on them as well. For that, I'm going to use bellow brown. It's a nice sandier sort of yellowy brown, which works nicely for rope or anything like that. It also just works as a lighter yet leather colour. Final base colour I'm going to do is the gold, and for that I'm using my Vallejo's liquid metal rich gold. This is one of those golds I think which has just got a lovely shine to it and a lovely colour. Basically, you pick which parts you like. You want to do gold. There's some areas on some of the axes that I've done gold. You've all got the bracelets. You'll probably find some have got like earrings and things like that. Like this one in particular, it's got a ring here, as well as a ring on his other hand here. One of the reasons I really do like this liquid gold is the fact that it has almost one coat coverage, even though it's incredibly thin. I'm just going to whiz through the washes now that we've done the base colours, because there's not really that many to do. So first of all, for his ginger hair, I'm going to use Fugan Orange. And just apply that over everything that you've done for his ginger hair. So that's his hair, his eyebrows, and his beard. The orange wash will help to add quite a bit of brightness and vividness to the Jacaro orange, because Jacaro orange is actually quite a subdued pale orange. So the addition of a Fugan wash or any orange wash over it will help to make the orange a little bit bolder. And then for the axe handle and for any of the leather areas that you're going to be doing, I'm going to use Agrax Earthshade over there. Over the trousers, over the denim that I'm doing, I'm going to use Contrast Paints Griff Charger Grey and apply this as a sort of a semi-thick glaze. And what you do is you just guide it into the recesses so it does pull up more, but you don't want to do it like it's a wash, so you're not slopping it on there. Then for the lead Belcham axe head, a little bit of Nuln Oil. And then the final wash, which we're going to do over the skin and the gold, is going to be Reikland Flesh Shade. And that is all the washes done. Next up is just highlights, and then he's finished. To start off with the highlights, I'm going to be using some Troll Slayer Orange, and I'm going to be sort of dry brushing it over the texture of the beard and hair and anything that you've done for the ginger hair. For this, I'm using GW's medium base brush. Now, I find these things are generally pretty useless when it actually comes to doing base coats, because they lose their tip and fray out and all sorts of things. They're horrible. But when it comes to doing a dry brush, if you've already got one, I can actually recommend them for it, because they're a bit easier to control the paint when you're doing it because of the sort of chisel shape of the bristle. What you do is you just go over it many times, building it up. You don't want to do big thick layers because you run the risk of filling in any detail. So if you just keep working backwards and forwards, it'll take a fair few passes to do this, but it's not like it takes a huge amount of time, and it's worthwhile taking your time on this just to avoid filling any details and making a bit too much mess. But as you keep going backwards and forwards and building it up, because all the details so very nicely sculpted on the model, you start picking it out quite easily. Now that I've built up the highlights on the orange hair, we can move on to the next one, which is going to be the skin. That what I'm going to start with is reapplying the Bugman's Glow, but trying to leave the darker recesses where we put the Reikland Flesh Shade in. It'll also help if you thin your paint down a nice little bit as well, not too much, but just a bit. That'll help you with building up the colours. Paint in some of the detail around his head, forehead if you want. And then you've got his lip as well in there. The final stage of highlighting the flesh is going to be some Cadian Flesh Tone. This is just going to be used quite sparingly on just like the more prominent areas. So areas such as the bridge of his nose and the edge of his nostrils, like that. I tend to do the little tops of the cheeks, just a little bit, and then the brows as well. Do some sort of worry lines, wrinkly sort of things. If you thin this paint down, although it looks fairly bright here, by the time it's dried, it won't be nearly as stark. And on the top of his head just here, I like just drag it up like that towards it, so it's where it would be brighter. And then around the edge of his ears as well, little worry wrinkles on the side of his head. Well, not worry wrinkles, he's dwarf, isn't he? Frowning wrinkles rather, just on there. Around his belly. And when it comes to things like knuckles, just do a couple of little, sort of like touch the brush to the end where the knuckles are. So it looks kind of wrinkly and cracked. And on the back of his hand there, just little touches with it. There's on his knuckle there. When it's things like, I'll show you here just quickly on his shoulder muscle. A good way of doing this is nice little quick lines that show off the sinewy muscle that the dwarves are quite often depicted having. There you go. Right, tops of biceps, here's his forearm and his tricep and elbow. There we go. Be back when I've finished off that. For his eyes, I'm going to use a little bit of pallid witch flesh. I'm just going to carefully do the pupils like this. Okay. And for this, I'm actually using a size 0 green stuff brush, which I've recently discovered, and they are very nice brushes. Turn the model round as you need to be able to get at these eyes properly. And then to finish them off, you're going to be using a tiny bit of Abaddon Black, or any other black that you've got. And a good trick for lining them up is line up with the corner of the mouth and go straight up, and that's a good place to try and put your pupil. There we go. And then we move on to the next one, which is going to be all the darker leather pouches that we've done. For that, I'm going to be using some Gawthor Brown, and there's not a lot of details on these things, a lot of edges, so just pick out anything that there is. If it's their boots, pick around the edges where they would be, and pouches, just highlight anything like that, like the flaps or anything like that. After that, I'm going to highlight the axe hafts. For that, I'm going to use Baneblade Brown. And just thin it down, use a nice thin brush, and you can see there's some detail on it, and just try and follow it. You don't have to be too precise, because the good thing with wood is it's not usually got perfectly straight lines of grain in it, so you can deviate if you want, and it won't be the end of the world. After that, I'm going to highlight the blue denim parts. For that, I'm going to use some rust grey. Just sort of pick out any details that you want really with these. And remember, just because it looks quite bright now, it will lose some of that brightness when it dries. For the bellow brown belt, I'm just going to highlight in Zamesi Desert. That one is just going to be putting basically some tiny little dots on the rope to make it look like some brighter areas. Quite a nice simple little touch, but it adds a nice little bit of depth to it. After that, I'm going to start doing the metallic areas. And for that, I'm going to start by using some iron breaker just to pick out the edges of the lead belcher areas that we've done. Somewhere like a flat blade like that. Do that in a bit brighter so it looks like it's a sharpened edge. For the gold bits, I'm going to use some Runefang steel, and that's just picking out any of the little raised areas just on the top bits that you want to look like they're particularly shiny. Basically pick out some edges, make it look like it's shining. And then to finish it off, I'm going to highlight the power axe blade. And for that, I'm just going to use some pure white. I'll paint it on the absolute very edges of everything. So on the edge of the blade here, if you hold the model at an angle as you're doing it, you can turn it round as you're going. It makes life a lot easier. You can skim your bristles along the edge of the blade, along any edges that there are, to make getting nice sharp lines a lot easier. And then when it comes to the edge of the blade, I'm just going to very carefully go round that edge. And what I'm going to do for where the symbols have been carved into the axe, I'm going to highlight the edges of these, but only where they're getting towards the sharper area. A little tip for filling in the gaps you often see in the bases after you put the models in, at least the way I do it anyway, is to use some blue tack. Inexpensive and relatively easy. So what you do is I just roll it up into like a ball that's a bit bigger than what you actually want. Go in from the underside, not too much because it can be a pain in the bum to sort out. And then you just poke it in, then use a modelling tool, sculpting tool, just to poke it in there, like that. Push it through till it blobs out the other side. And then take a craft knife and just sort of try and slice it off carefully, but you know, you're not even using much weight here to do this. There you go. Do that both sides. Oops, it just flops out a little bit. And then you use your craft knife very carefully and gently slice it off. There we go. From there, I'm going to paint the base with Games Workshop's Warboss Green. So I find this is pretty close to Goblin Green. I'm going to put the flock on him. And here they are, all finished up and based up, ready to go. For the green power axes, what I did was I started off with a base coat of Caliban Green, and then I worked up with Warpstone Glow, and then finished off with Moot Green. And for the red power axes, what I did was I started off with Corn Red, built up with Evil Sun Scarlet, and then finished off with a bit of Troll Slayer Orange to complete them. There's also, if you notice, one or two of them in there with some sheepskin cloaks on. For that, what I did was a coat of Pallid Witch Flesh, and then I did it in Agrax Earthshade Wash, and then reapplied a little dry brush of the Pallid Witch Flesh over the top of that. And that gave it quite a nice woolly look. And then with that, they are all ready to go. I hope you think that the Power Axe effect helps to sell them for that second edition 40k look. And I've got to say, I'm actually quite pleased with them. Fingers crossed the client is as well. And with that, that is the second part to this squat commission completed. What do you lot reckon? Do you think the addition of a power weapon glow to the Warhammer Fantasy Troll Slayers helps to sell them for 40k? Personally, I reckon it helps quite nicely. What do you think? Would you be giving this a go yourself? Personally as well, like I said, I think they do work quite nicely for replacing any Troll Slayers or Assault Squads that they never actually made for 40k, which is a great shame and a large missed opportunity by Games Workshop. But with these going in there, I hope the client will be very happy. If anybody who's watching this is interested in getting a commission done, in the description below there will be a link to my website where you can go to have a look at some galleries or get a quote if you'd like. And finally, thank you very much for watching, stay smiling and keep the old hammer alive. Still here? Well, that tells me that you are either having my videos on playthrough whilst doing things in the background, or you're potentially really enjoying my content and loving what I'm doing. If it's the latter, down in the description below there is a link to a Ko-fi account. You can make a one-off donation of £1 or as much as you would like. All of that is aimed towards hopefully being able to progress this channel further and further and being able to bring even more classic old hammer to everyone out there. I've got ideas for doing things like more extra stuff for 40k, as well as wanting to do Warhammer Fantasy. I also really want to get into Epic Space Marines, Gork and Walker, and there are just so many more. So if you really enjoy my content and you're feeling super generous, why not give it a quick look? No pressure whatsoever, entirely up to you. Either way, thank you very much for watching all these videos, and I love you all.